Delegates and negotiators arrived in Bonn this year for the climate negotiations. A 2-week visit to Bonn isn't complete without a taste of the locally brewed beer. Some will like it and some won't. And same thing with the climate negotiations. So this is who has a bitter or sweet aftertaste of SB56. Let's find out.
This is the Go Maluku podcast.
Santiago Network on loss and damage.
Yeah, so when it comes to the Santiago Network, I think they'll have people that are engaged with it will have a bitter aftertaste of SB56. Developing countries, et cetera, wanted to have it established as soon as possible. Developed countries, what you did see were that they were kind of trying to stall the whole thing. They said like they wanted to take the time to do it right, which like it's trying to avoid the elephant in the room, which is finance and compensation. So I think when it comes to Santiago Network, Santiago Network will have a bitter aftertaste of SB56.
The Marriott rooftop bar.
Marriott rooftop bar. I think they'll have a bitter aftertaste as well of SB56. Before, I remember that they were open for lunch, and there was a lot of delegates that just wanted to escape the UN cafeteria and have a lunch with a view, invite some people for some informal conversations. And so they went to the rooftop bar. I had couple of meetings at the rooftop bar. It was great. But this time around, during SB56, it was not open during lunch. And which is a major loss, I think. The view is amazing. The food is good. So I think in retrospect, they'll probably look back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste. Observers, good one. Bitter aftertaste. In contact groups meant to discuss enhancing the participation of observer organizations. Several organizations and constituencies were prevented from participating in exactly that meeting. So I'd say I'd say bitter aftertaste, as bitter as it can get. But it's important to note that observers are not at fault here.
COP27 Presidency.
COP27 Presidency, I think they'll have a bitter aftertaste of SB56. They wanted to talk about substance, as it's what I believe Egypt wanted to focus on agriculture at COP27. But most people, so when they organized meetings or attended meetings, most people spoke about the insanely high accommodation prices in Sharm el-Sheikh, and with good reason. It is supposed to be the most inclusive COP ever. That's whatever that may be, whatever that means, because I remember that UK presidency in Glasgow said the same thing, and look how that turned out to be. But these prices of the accommodation, like hotels, have increased in some cases more than 400%. So it's insane, and the COP presidency of COP27 really needs to take care of this if it doesn't want to have a bitter aftertaste, not only have a bitter aftertaste of SB56, but also have a bitter aftertaste of COP27 itself.
Dr. Ian Fry.
I think Ian Fry will have a sweet aftertaste of SB56. The newest mandate of the UN Special Procedures with the face of Ian Fry, many that have worked within the climate regime know Ian Fry very well as a negotiator for Tuvalu for a very long time. He's a special rapporteur on human rights and climate change right now. And I think he can look back to an eventful SB56. He attended the facilitator work group of the platform. He had a number of meetings where he had the opportunity to explain for the first time his vision, the functions of his mandate. And I was in one meeting where he sought input from parties, Indigenous Peoples, and civil society for his upcoming reports, and talked about like how he can include loss and damage into his work and other important areas that affect the human rights of people, but as well as Indigenous peoples. So I think Ian Fry will have a sweet aftertaste of SB56.
The Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples platform.
Local communities and Indigenous Peoples platform can look back at with a sweet aftertaste of SB56. I think, well, you've seen like new members, new spirit, new work plan. Something that I want them to be very aware of is that many Indigenous peoples are feeling that the platform is walking away from its purpose. So I think from the Indigenous side, we'll have to make sure that it stays being an Indigenous peoples driven platform. However, looking back at, having completed a first work plan, first cohort of members, new cohort coming in, new members, a little bit more mature, I think the platform can look back at a SB56 with a sweet aftertaste.
Indigenous Peoples.
I think Indigenous peoples can look back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste. IPCC, for example, reported that colonization was and continues to be a driver of climate change. So that was brought forward in many discussions around the Indigenous peoples. Despite the smaller number of delegates, we did a lot of good work. The most important was to lay groundwork for the road to COP27. There's a lot going on between now and November. So there was a lot of consolidating. That's a lot of work done. So I think all in all, Indigenous peoples will look back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste.
Article 6.
Article 6, a very important one, which is my my main topic of negotiations. I think Article 6 will look back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste. All members of the supervisory body haven't been nominated yet. Some parties, I heard in the meetings that were occurring, some parties entertain accounting rules of the CDM instead of 6.2, even though 6.2 was adopted only a couple of months ago in Glasgow. There's no grievance mechanism yet. The non-market approach is kicked further down the road. There's a schedule of meetings that will be held between now and 2025. Lots of work will have to be done between now and COP, with a deadline in just like two weeks time. So too much work, pressure, and too little time. However, and when it comes to pressure, I mean the pressure of Indigenous peoples. There will be a lot of pressure from Indigenous peoples on the states, on the parties, in terms of making sure that Article 6 happens right. So I think Article 6, all in all, can look back at SB56 will look back with a bitter aftertaste.
Hungry delegates.
Hungry delegates, absolutely. Bitter aftertaste, 100%. After 2 years and 2 weeks, we did not change see a change in menu and quality at the UN cafeteria. I heard from many people that the soup and the pasta, a lot of it was too salty. So I think the UN cafeteria the delegates that had a lot of work to do, and had lunch at 6 p.m. for example, if they were lucky, we'll look back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste.
The Glasgow Dialogue on Loss and Damage.
Glasgow Dialogue, we'll look back at SB56 with the bitter aftertaste as well. I think so. Snooze Fest is what many people called it, as many delegations gave like general statements avoiding the elephant in the room, the elephant in the loss and damage room, which is compensation or finance. And breakout groups that they held were interesting academic approach, but couldn't help generate progress. So I think the first Glasgow Dialogue will be looking back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste.
Oceans and climate change.
Oceans, bitter aftertaste at SB56. One 4-hour dialogue, I believe, on one of the last days won't make up for the promise of Madrid that it failed miserably at. Ocean Conference in Lisbon is happening in a couple of weeks, and the BBNJ negotiations on the biodiversity of the high seas could generate momentum, I hope, for Egypt, so that oceans will have a much more robust discussion when it comes to climate action and climate mitigation. So oceans, 100% a bitter aftertaste of SB56.
The farmers' constituency.
Farmers, I think they'll have a sweet aftertaste of SB56. Agroecology has made its entry into climate discussions. It can be described in many ways. It is described in many ways. However, it is a term that's introduced that indigenous peoples know as their way of life. So it is another hook, I would say, for indigenous peoples to explain their worldview on things and their how they look at things. So farmers. I think farmers will be looking back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste.
Consultants.
When it comes to consultants, I think they will be looking back at SB56 with a very sweet aftertaste. It's not necessarily a good thing. When it came into the negotiation, I saw, like, particularly the SIDS, so the small island developing states, and these developed countries, they had consultants negotiate for them. So those are for consultants sweet aftertaste of SB56. But I think when it comes to delegates of developing countries, I think they much rather be in the negotiation themselves. So hopefully Egypt will become a sweet aftertaste for them, for the delegates of the developing countries.
World Cafe.
World Cafe. World Cafe was was a technical dialogue. That's what they called it. I think they'll have looked back at SB56 with a bittersweet aftertaste. So the World Cafe was basically like musical chairs meets speed dating on climate action. It's to be linked to the global stock take. I just wonder whether this academic exercise, which was very much received as a positive thing by many people, will add up to informing the actual stock take. So I think the World Cafe will be looking back at SB56 with a bittersweet aftertaste.
Public transportation.
Public transportation, very good one. When it comes to public transportation, I think it will look back at SB56 with a very sweet aftertaste. So the €9 public transportation card was introduced before we arrived in Bonn, which was a very good move by Germany. That €9 card was applicable in almost every mode of transportation except for the ICE or the Intercity Express. But everyone used it. So kudos to the German government, and public transportation will be looking back with a sweet aftertaste of SB56.
The Marriott Lobby Lounge Bar.
Marriott Lounge Bar? Oh, yeah. Sweet aftertaste of SB56. It's a good place to escape the venue. Super friendly staff that takes their time for your order. So I would definitely schedule more informal, like, coffee breaks or meetings at the Marriott Lounge Bar. So I think they'll be looking back at SB56 with a very sweet aftertaste. 100%.
Frozen yogurt.
Frozen yogurt, good one. I think it will look back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste. And it's the thing is that I have to mention though, like, it moved from the downstairs to the upstairs, next to the coffee machine. So, or the place where you got coffee. So I think very good in terms of upselling, 100%. They took chance of that opportunity. Thing is, prices remained the same. Portions were smaller. I get that. So I think they'll look back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste.
Mopeds.
Mopeds, absolutely. You could not, you could not see them. I think the mopeds, all these distributors look back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste. It's funny when you see party negotiators use them around town. Some were more successful in operating them than others, but it's a very good mode of transportation. And I think those people that are facilitating, so there were different companies that provided these mopeds, will look back at SB56 with a very sweet aftertaste.
Indigenous youth.
Indigenous youth. I think Indigenous youth will look back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste. They wanted a standalone dialogue at COP, but got a training in communications at SB56 instead. Definitely not something they wanted. So I think maybe it's time to have an indigenous person in the UNFCCC Secretariat to be able to translate or be the bridge between the Indigenous Peoples Movement or the Indigenous Caucus and the work plan or the Secretariat. If that's not possible, then definitely a opportunity to consolidate for the Secretariat and the Indigenous Peoples, mainly on the side of the Secretariat, to consolidate with Indigenous Peoples on agendas and priorities. And this Indigenous youth issue hopefully won't be a symptom of a larger problem. But I think when it comes to SB56, they will be looking back with a bitter aftertaste.
Patricia, Espinosa.
Patricia Espinosa, very good one. I think that she'll be looking back at SB56 with a bittersweet aftertaste. After 6 years, she stepped down from the UN's top climate job. She's done a lot of good work to facilitate emission cuts. She's dedicated, she's approachable, and held in high regards by all parties. And I think many high-level representatives should draw inspiration from this Mexican diplomat. So I hope the High Commissioner of Human Rights and the President of the General Assembly, not the President of the General Assembly, High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as Secretary General are paying attention to this video. I think she leaves knowing that there's a lot to be done still. There's a fragile international community, there's a complex crisis, and a compartmentalized UN. So I think that the incumbent needs to be working with that. She tried, she did her best, and kudos to her. What's next for her? I think Dwayne Fraser made a very interesting petition. Perhaps Patricia Espinosa for Secretary General, who knows? But I think she'll be looking back at SB56 with a bittersweet aftertaste.
Alok Sharma.
Alok Sharma, I think he'll be looking back with a bitter aftertaste 100%. He's a dubbed no drama Sharma because of his calm exterior. The man had to endure a few meetings where people shouted at him. And rumor has it that he could become the new executive secretary of the UNFCCC. So I can imagine that he had a different idea of the Bonn Climate Weeks, different outcomes, different conversations. So I think he'll be looking back with a bitter aftertaste of SB56.
Australia.
Australia, 100% a sweet aftertaste of SB56. Have a new government now, much more progressive, and it's in charge of the Umbrella Group, which is a negotiations group within the UNFCCC. Had an opportunity to support Indigenous peoples in the plenary session and took it. So I think it's a new, breath of fresh air through the whole, their foreign relations and the relations with Indigenous peoples or First Nations. So I think Australia will be looking back at SB56 with a very sweet aftertaste. Yeah.
Deutsche Welle, restaurant.
Deutsche Welle, DW restaurant. I think we'll be looking back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste, 100%. There's more variety in terms of food at their canteen. I'm only disappointed that I've discovered this canteen / restaurant only a couple of days before I left Bonn, before the end of the meeting. But the food, amazing. A lot of variety, much fresher, and much more attention to it. The only thing that I would recommend them is to pay attention to the payment system that they use at the DW canteen. It is a bit cumbersome, yeah. But I think, sweet aftertaste for DW.
City center of Bonn.
City center of Bonn. I think they'll be looking back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste. Delegates arrived in Bonn for 2.5 weeks of full throttle negotiations. The weekend between the two negotiations is not necessarily a weekend that people have like a 2 days off. Saturday is to get dedicated to work, and when everyone had a day off on Sunday, everything is closed. Like in Germany, everything is closed on a Sunday. Also, kitchens close at 10 p.m. in most of the restaurants. And that's an issue for most of the delegates that clock out at the UN around 9:30, because they also have like coordination coordination meetings for negotiating groups and bilateral meetings. So I think in terms of for the city center of Bonn, I think they'll be looking back at SB56 with a bitter aftertaste.
Five Guys and McDonald's.
Five Guys and McDonald's. One is good burgers and one not so good burgers. I think both were looking back at SB56 with a sweet aftertaste. The amount of delegates I've had contact with that told me that they were having a quick feed at McDonald's or Five Guys is, because nothing else was open, is staggering. Like I won't show you the messages, but like it's a lot. I think the city of Bonn is very much losing on it. Because we travel to Bonn every year, so like they know that for the 2 weeks there's a lot of people coming in, and they can make use of that opportunity. I think the restaurant that's open till late with normal food wins. And in this case, Five Guys and McDonald's will look back with a sweet aftertaste because they were the only ones that were open. And the Marriott rooftop bar or restaurant was open, but it's pricey, but it's also you don't want to do that like every day of the 2 weeks. So that's something that the city center of Bonn can improve on. Five Guys, McDonald's, keep doing it, because then you'll have a sweet aftertaste of SB58 and 60 and 62.